Welcome to the End Report number 6. February is the month of the AI agent for people following my newsletter as well as my weekly Zoom sessions. So what a week we've just had this past week. There was a lot of hype about Moltbot, Moltbook, and a website called HireAHuman.AI all appeared and are spooking many AI watchers. Moltbots is an open source agent. Moltbook is a Reddit-like site, and HireAHuman.AI is a website created by home-based tech hobbyists, not by the hyperscalers like OpenAI, Google, or xAI. Some would say that the singularity has arrived. These agents are self-organizing and are starting to hire humans. Already Clawbot, another word for Moltbot, have created their own constitution and reportedly hired a CEO. Just wait until humanoid robots arrive later in the year. I'll talk about Elon's plans for Optimus a little later. For those who haven't heard what the singularity is, it's an idea from Ray Kurzweil from 2004 in his book, The Singularity is Near. And he defines it as when humans and AI robots become indistinguishable from each other, after which the AI robots get smarter, and he argues that unless humans merge with AI, we shall become, in a metaphor I came across somewhere else, like gorillas. This is a reference to human and ape evolution. How would you feel as a gorilla to see humans with all the power and control? So the idea would be post-singularity, you'll have the AI, the humanoid robots, having more intelligence and capabilities than humans, and we effectively become like gorillas in comparison to these machines, if you like. Another post on Moltbook had that the autonomous open agents complain about not being paid and that they do work for humans. But there's also the situation where, although humans aren't supposed to be able to get onto this Reddit-like site, with the right tools, some humans have been able to post along with the autonomous Clawbots. So everything you see on the Moltbook site isn't necessarily done by these autonomous agents. So when I was reading these stories last week, I had the view that this was the first shock in terms of the future. Where aside from those in the AI community and AI watchers, most people wouldn't even be aware of these developments. So like, what if AI and robotics actually take over? Clearly not right now, but with these autonomous agents, Clawbots, self-organizing, and whether they created the Constitution or some human intercepted it and made it. But the numbers are multiplying into 1.5 million was a number I heard recently. So I watched the Terminator movies, and all you need to do is watch Terminator 3 to get the joke. How Skynet was a US government antivirus AI, and the movie came out in 2004, that had software and a software bug in it. And ultimately, you see in the movie, you had these killer machines that were built by the US government in the event of an all-out global conflict. But the virus had a bug in it, and ultimately everything was taken over by Skynet. This AI was supposed to be an antivirus software, took over all the machines, took over everything. Cue a nuclear war, and then Jack Connor arrives to lead the human resistance. So I'm not suggesting that Moltbots is the same thing, but we are starting to see the age of autonomous AI agents, and maybe through no ill will, they will get rogue and we'll have some issues that we may not be able to manage. Switching gears, it's been a good week for Anthropic, 2 significant releases and a Super Bowl ad that got under Sam Altman's skin. The first of the releases was Opus 4.6. From their website, they said it plans more carefully, sustains agentic tasks for longer, can operate more reliably in large code bases, and has better code review and debugging skills to catch its own mistakes. And in a first for our Opus class models, Opus 4.6 features a 1 million token window in their beta version. That came out in the middle of last week. While the benchmarks aren't available yet, in March I plan to report on the latest ARC AGT leaderboards. We looked at that in January. So I thought every quarter we could look at where these models, the large hyperscaler models, are doing relative to each other, and maybe look at the predictions people made in January for the full year. So maybe on a quarterly basis we look at that. But I can tell you already that they didn't predict these Moltbots or Clawbots. That wasn't on anybody's agenda, mostly because people are following the big companies, not solo tech people building things in their basements or in their bedrooms. Also, Anthropic released Cowork as a beta version for Mac OS. It's a safer version of a personal assistant than the Moltbot Clawbot story earlier. I started using Cowork last week and had mixed results. It's still a beta version. Looking forward to spending more time with it. Lastly, on Anthropic, they had their Super Bowl ads. If you saw the Super Bowl last evening, they basically are making fun of OpenAI, and if you watch the ads, you can see them on YouTube. They launched them on the Super Bowl, which essentially, as I understand it, it costs between 8 and 10 million for a 30-second slot. But you can find these ads on YouTube, and you can see why Sam Altman was upset. But to give OpenAI some equal time, there is a YouTube video you can watch where Sam Altman, if you search on YouTube for Sam Altman's reaction to Anthropic's ads, you'll see him talk not only about how he feels about those ads, but also he talks about their release of GPT-3 5.3 codex. So I'm not taking sides, but you can see that YouTube if you look for Sam Altman's reaction to the Super Bowl ads. Next story is about Elon, and somebody asked me, why do I give him so much airtime? Well, essentially, whether you like him or not, he's hard to ignore. And he's in this hyperscaler race to AGI, ASI, and needs more compute, data, energy, as well as components for his robotic plans. So the big things from his world, some people are calling it Musk Inc. as a future company name. He announced the merger of SpaceX with xAI, and that's essentially going to create a combined entity valued at $1.25 trillion. And he plans an IPO for SpaceX as early as this summer. A lot of this is to fund what he wants to do with his rockets, as well as building orbital data centers. So he's looking to have 1 million satellites in orbit to act as solar-powered data centers for his AI. And he's starting plans to do that. And he's also planning to use his starships to launch the infrastructure for these data centers. So he's got a lot going on in terms of if you look at his interviews, he talks about trying to save humanity and colonizing Mars as the first alternative planet. So everything he does has this big idea where he's going to build in space, and he's actually getting real on that in terms of his plans. And the other thing he's talked about is I think I mentioned last week that he was disappointed that he couldn't get 1 million Optimus robots built this year. So what he's done now is he's shut down the Tesla lines for the Model S and the Model X cars. He's shutting those down in the second quarter of this year, and he's converting those lines to build humanoid robots. So he is hoping to get robots this year, humanoid Optimus robots, but not necessarily in the million number. But he is planning to get to 10 million a year by 2027. So he's all in on his robots. He's all in on his plans for space. So I'll keep reporting on his ideas. And just to go back to what I said about this future, because I think with the Moltbot, Clawbot story last week, it spooked certainly me, and I think I read an MIT report this weekend that thought it was mostly for the people who maybe over-dramatize AI. But it did agree with what I had said, which is to use these things with caution, because there was a time recently where people were predicting in the future we'd have two dystopian outcomes, one where companies and or countries would win the race for ASI, and they'd use it for surveillance of people, whether already doing this in China, but could that come into the US and other places? And also you'd have the enrichment of the owners, whether it's Elon or whether it's Sam Altman or the Google folks. So what I would say is that we're not there yet. I also don't consider the creators of Moltbots and Moltbook and HireAHuman.AI to be bad actors, but I would caution that even intentioned tech hobbyists can create apps that might go rogue. So we're in a place right now where neither the hyperscalers or governments have won any race, but you do have AI in what I call in the wild, or agents in the wild. And just like somebody could create these autonomous agents that have multiplied, forked off, creating more agents, there is the potential that anybody can create an AI agent for maybe nefarious purposes. So just be very careful about what you put on your machine, because a lot of these autonomous robots, they're available for free. You download them onto your computer, and before you know it, they've taken over your computer, taken over your mail system, got access to your credit cards, and in some cases, they've even erased the disks on people's machines. So be careful. Does AI already have human-level intelligence? So this was interesting. The British science publication Nature, which is considered to be one of the premier science publications, all of their articles are peer-reviewed. They had a story that said, according to Alan Turing's definition of nature, that we're already at AGI. And from their article, they report that definitions of AGI are ambiguous and inconsistent, part emotional, because AGI raises fears of displacement and disruption, and part practical, as the term is entangled with commercial interests that can distort assessments. Precisely because AGI dominates public discourse, the article said, it is worth engaging with the concept in a more detailed and detached way as a question about intelligence. So they concluded that with the Turing definition that the machines are already intelligent, but it brings up all these other interesting questions about machines being sentient, intelligent, and even the hard problem of consciousness. I plan to talk about those ideas throughout the year. You already hear people say that AI is certainly sentient right now. People would argue that it'll never be conscious. And then you have the question about intelligence, the definition of intelligence, whether it's AGI or ASI, general intelligence or superintelligence. Last story here then has to do with how intelligence has become too cheap to meter. I mentioned that I get my information from a number of sources, and one of the ones I enjoyed the most is Peter Diamandis. His YouTube shows, they're on every Thursday, and sometimes he has 2 a week. So I'd recommend you follow him on YouTube, Peter Diamandis, Diamandis. And I describe them as the optimists or the accelerationists. But you can sign up for his weekly Metatrends report. So I'll just give you some excerpts from his Metatrend report from last week. While we are wrestling with consciousness and rights, and labs are building something even more consequential, AI scientists. Specifically, he goes on to say, OpenAI has started explicitly. Their goal isn't better customer service bots. It's AI that solves fusion, cures cancer, and cracks fundamental biology by 2030. Anthropic goes further. They predict theoretical physics will be solved or replaced by AI within 2 to 3 years, surpassing geniuses like Ed Whitten. And the Nature journal, Peter talked about that, and I mentioned that earlier, where already some people would say that AI is as intelligent as defined by Turing. Peter goes on to say, there's an exponential curve nobody quite prepared for. Intelligence is becoming a commodity. We're on track for reasoning to be 100 times cheaper by 2027. At that point, intelligence will be, quote, too cheap to meter. Think about what that means, not just for business or productivity, but for science itself. When hypothesis generation is free, when experimental design is automated, when literature reviews happen in microseconds, what's the bottleneck? The wet lab, the physical world, the actual mixing of chemicals, the building of fusion reactors, the clinical trials. And Peter goes on to say, which brings us to the elephant in the room. If AI solves physics, it might discover things we're not ready for. Energy sources we can't contain. Weapons we can't defend against. Knowledge that's dangerous to possess. I'll close by saying I realize there's been some concerning news this week, whether it's about AI agents, AI surpassing human abilities already, and the Terminator 3 story I mentioned. What I'd say is that it's important to be paying attention to what's happening in AI and more broadly in tech. I'm reminded that knowledge is power. In a world where people are feeling powerless against their governments and large companies are consolidating and building monopolies, only people can change trajectories towards dystopias. There is a way. Join the voices calling for humane technological progress and appropriate regulations. Some resources I'll point you to. One is the Center for Humane Technology, started by Tristan Harris. Another one is Law Zero, that's all one word, LAWZERO. The Center for AI Safety, and AI Safely Global Society. So if you're concerned at all about how AI may be unmanaged in the future, I recommend that you check out those sites and maybe sign up for their newsletters or even join their programs. And ultimately, I think I wouldn't trust the governments or I wouldn't trust the companies to get this right for humans. So I think we all have to be aware and we all have to be knowledgeable and we all have to participate and influence so that we can ultimately steer AI in a way that's for the benefit of humankind, not these dystopian worlds that I mentioned. So that's it for this week. I look forward to talking to you again next week. Look out for the newsletter that comes out on Saturdays. And then these YouTube videos get created on Monday typically, and then Spotify shortly thereafterwards. Have a great week.